Welcome to episode. Today we're going to read Synopsis. We're going to be doing daily devotions with Daniel, and then we're going to reading the Bible, then we're going to be doing Synopsis, and then we're going to bring 2 chapters. I did that in one breath.
Yay!
I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and the bell notification over here. And by the way, this is the real ring to rule them all.
The one ring to rule them all.
The one ring.
He's invisible.
And then so.
And now for Devotions with Daniel.
Please do not do that.
Okay. Already on the first word, and I don't know how to pronounce it. Hezekiah gave encouragement to all the Levites who taught the good knowledge of the Lord. 2 Chronicles 30:22. Motivational expert Ron White tells of being in Navy boot camp. He was tired, intimidated, scared, and hungry. Another sailor who was about to graduate passed him in the hallway and seeing his fatigued expression, whispered out of the side of his mouth, "Hang in there, you can do it." White never learned the sailor's name, and he never saw him again, but those words saw through him like electricity, and he replayed them each night before going to bed. They revamped his attitude, and he preserved until he finished the program. On graduation day, White saw 3 sailors leaning against the wall. They were tired, intimidated, scared, and hungry. Walking over to them, he whispered, "Hang in there, you can do it." From the expressions on their faces, he knew his words had hit home. In 2 Chronicles 30, Hezekiah encouraged the Levites, who went on to encourage the people to whom they ministered. Encouragement isn't just a shot in the dark, it's a chain reaction that passes through from person to person until it travels from beyond its point of origin. Has someone encouraged you recently? Pass it on. The best way to cheer yourself up is to cheer everybody else up. Mark Twain.
Hello, everybody. So we have a special announcement to make.
That's invisible.
I'm not invisible. All right. So I have been reading, as you know, 1st and now 2nd Samuel. We're on chapter 10. And what you may not realize is that Kimberly has also been reading her Bible, only she didn't start with 1st and 2nd Samuel. She started with Genesis. And she's been reading 4 chapters very faithfully every night, and she hasn't taken nights off like we do when we're doing the live stream, because we go on trips or whatever we're doing that makes us not able to do the live stream every night. So she has been very diligent and been keeping up. Now she is on second chapter, Samuel 10. 2 Samuel chapter 10, which happens to be the same chapter that we're on. And so, as a guest reader tonight, we're going to welcome Kimberly, who will be very shortly surpassing us in her diligent reading of Scripture. And without further ado, here's Kimberly.
So I'm 2 Samuel 10 is going to be the chapter that I'm going to be stopping with. I haven't read the other 3 that from tonight yet, so this is the bookmark that I've been using. So 2 Samuel 10. David defeats Ammon, I think? Ammon and Syria. Sorry. I'm really bad with the pronunciations, but hope I don't get it too wrong. After this, the king of the Ammonites. Okay. After this, the king of the Ammonites died, and Hanan,
Just keep going. It's fine.
his son, reigned in his place. And David said, I will deal loyally with Hanan and the son of Nahash, as his father dealt loyally with me. So David sent by his servants to console him concerning his father. And David's servants came into the land of the Ammonites, but the princes of the Ammonites said to Hanan, their lord, do you think because David sent his comforters to you that he is honoring your father? Has not David sent his servants to you to search the city and spy it out to overthrow it? So Hanan took David's servants and shaved off half the beard of each and cut off their garments in the middle at their hips and sent them away. When it was told to David, he sent to meet them, for the men were greatly ashamed. And the king said, remain at Jericho until your beards have grown, and then return. When the Ammonites saw that they had become a stench to David, the Ammonites sent and hired the Syrians. Sorry, I do know.
It's fine. Just keep reading.
At Beth Rehob, and the Syrians of Zoab, 20,000 foot soldiers, and the king of Mecca with 1,000 men, and the men of Tob 12,000 men. And when David heard of it, he sent Jacob to all the host and the mighty men, and the Ammonites came out and drew up in battle array at the entrance of the gate, and the Syrians and Zoab and Rehob and the men of Tob and Mecca were by themselves in the open country. When Jacob saw that the battle was set against him, both in front and in the rear, he chose some of the best men of Israel and arrayed them against the Syrians. The rest of his men he put in charge of the Abishai, his brother, and he arrayed them against the Amorites. He said, if the Syrians are too strong for me, you shall help me, but if the Amorites are too strong for you, then I shall come and help you. Be of good courage, and let us be courageous for our people and our cities of our God, and may the Lord do what seems good to him. So Joab, and the people were with him and drew near to battle against the Syrians, and they fled before him. And when the Amorites saw that the Syrians fled, they likewise fled before Abishai and entered the city. Then Job returned from fighting against the Amorites and came to Jerusalem. But when the Syrians saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they gathered themselves together, and Hadadezer sent and brought out of the Syrians who were beyond the Euphrates?
Yes, Euphrates. The river.
Right. They came to Helam with Shobach, the commander of the army of Hadzir, at their head. And when it was told to David, he gathered all Israel together and crossed the Jordan and came to Helam. The Syrians arrayed themselves against David, and he fought them. And the Syrians fled before Israel, and David killed the Syrians of the men of 700 chariots and 40,000 horsemen, and wounded Sabach, the commander of their army, so that he died there. And when all the kings who were servants of Hadzir saw that he had been defeated by Israel, they made peace with Israel and became subject to them. So the Syrians were afraid to save the Amorites anymore.
Okay.
Sorry for all my mispronunciations. I'm not very good at that.
That's fine. You don't have to apologize.
Thank you.
Okay, so at this time, since Kim left, all right, so it's time for the synopsis. Here we go.
Kim, why did
All right.
you bestow this upon us?
So
Hold on.
they were going through the Emmanuel, which is a bunch of rocky mountains, and Gollum came and stole the ring and killed them all, and that's the end of the story.
Kim, that's the 20th time. No joke.
Here is Kim to say how it really happened.
Dad, I knew you liked doing the false synopsis, so I let you. So what really happened was they were going through that area, and it was very rocky. There was a storm, and Frodo, he was in this little cave area on the cliff, and Sam, he managed to help him up, and they waited for a little bit, then they went down, and Gollum came down too, and they managed to tame Gollum. I say tame is a light term because I don't think that it's going to last long. But Gollum is going with them and showing them the way to Mordor. And apparently he knows a secret way that the orcs do not. I'm going to hand it off to Dad, who's going to read us the story.
Welcome back to my story time. Back to my...
Welcome.
That is some creepiness that I have never beheld before in my life. Okay, so I'm waiting for two people to return. And for JJ to sit down. I don't know. But we are on chapter 2. It's hard to believe that we're this far into the story and it's only chapter 2. But this is book 4, which is actually book 2, the Two Towers, and the second section. Do we have water running somewhere? Okay. And okay. And the title of this chapter is The Passage of the Marshes. And without further ado, since I already used that word once today, thought I'd use it again.
He's back and front.
Yes, he's back. And he's front. All right. Chapter 2, The Passage of the Marshes. Gollum moved quickly with his head and neck thrust forward, often using his hands as well as his feet. Frodo and Sam were hard put to it to keep up with him, but he seemed no longer to have any thought of escaping, and if they fell behind, he would turn and wait for them. After a long time, he brought them to the brink of the narrow gully that they had struck before, but they were now further from the hills. "Here it is!" he cried. "There is a way down inside, yes. Now we follows it out away over there." He pointed south and east toward the marshes. The reek of them came into their nostrils, heavy and foul even in the cool night air. Gollum cast up and down along the brink, and at length he called to them. "Here, we can get down here. Smeagol went this way once. I went this way, hiding from orcses." He led the way, and following him, the hobbits climbed down into the gloom. It was not difficult, for the rift was at this point only some 15 feet deep and about a dozen across. There was running water at the bottom. It was, in fact, the bed of one of the many small rivers that trickled down from the hills to feed the stagnant pools and mires beyond. Gollum turned to the right, southward, more or less, and splashed along with his feet in the shallow, stony stream. He seemed greatly delighted to feel the water and chuckled to himself, sometimes even croaking in a sort of song. The cold hard lands, they bites our hands, they gnaws our feets. Their rocks and stones are like old bones, all bare of meats. But stream and pool is wet and cool, so nice for feet, and now we wish. Ha ha, what do we wish? He said, looking sidelong at the hobbits. We'll tell you, he croaked. He guessed it long ago, Baggins has guessed it. A glint came into his eyes, and Sam, catching the gleam in the darkness, thought it far from pleasant. Alive without breath, as cold as death, never thirsting, ever drinking, clad in mail, never clinking, drowns on dry land, thinks an island is a mountain, thinks a fountain is a puff of air, so sleek, so fair, what a joy to meet. We only wish to catch a fish, so juicy sweets. These words only made more pressing to Sam's mind a problem that had been troubling him from the moment when he understood that his master was going to adopt Gollum as a guide, the problem of food. It did not occur to him that his master might also have thought of it, but he supposed Gollum had. Indeed, how had Gollum kept himself in all his lonely wandering? Not too well, thought Sam. He looks fair famished, not too dainty to try what hobbit tastes like. If there ain't no fish, I'll wager, supposing as he could catch us napping. Well, he won't. Not Sam Gamgee, for one. They stumbled along in the dark winding gully, for a long time, or so it seemed, to the tired feet of Frodo and Sam. The gully turned eastward, and as they went on, it broadened and got gradually shallower. At last the sky above grew faint with the first gray of morning. Gollum had shown no sign of tiring, but now he looked up and halted. Day is near, he whispered, as if day was something that might overhear him and spring on him. Smeagol will stay here. I will stay here, and the yellow face won't see me. We should be glad to see the sun, said Frodo, but we will stay here. We are too tired to go any further at present. You are not wise to be glad of the yellow face, said Gollum. It shows you up. Nice, sensible hobbitses stay with Smeagol. Orcs and nasty things are abouts. They can see a long way. Stay and hide with me. The three of them settled down to rest at the foot of the rocky wall of the gully. It was not much more than a tall man's height now, and at its base there were wide, flat shelves of dry stone. The water ran in a channel on the other side. Frodo and Sam sat on one of the flats, resting their backs. Gollum paddled and scrambled. It actually says scrabbled. I think scrambled sounds better, don't you?
No.
In the stream. Fine.
Scrambled is what you do with eggs.
Whatever. She says scrambled is what you do with eggs. Thanks. Hi, Becca.
Oh, hi, Becca.
We must take a little food, said Frodo. Are you hungry, Smeagol? We have very little to share, but we will spare what we can. Spare you what we can. And at the word hungry, a greenish light was kindled in Gollum's pale eyes, and they seemed to protrude further than ever from his thin, sickly face. For a moment he relapsed into his old Gollum manner. We are famished! Yes, famished we are! Precious, he said. What is it they eats? Have they nice fishes? His tongue lolled out between his sharp yellow teeth, licking his colorless lips. No, we've got no fish, said Frodo. We've only got this. He held up a wafer of lembas, and water, if the water here is fit to drink. Yes, nice water, said Gollum. Drink it while we can. But what is it they've got, Precious? Is it crunchable? Is it tasty? Frodo broke off a portion of the wafer and handed it to him on a leaf wrapping. Gollum sniffed at the leaf, and his face changed. A spasm of disgust came over it, and a hint of old malice. Smeagol smells it, he said. Leaves out of the elves' country. Ah! They stinkses. He climbed in those trees, and he couldn't wash the smell of His hands! My nice hands! Dropping the leaf, he took a corner of the lembas and nibbled it. He spat, and a fit of coughing shook him. "Ah! No!" he spluttered. "You try to choke poor Smeagol. Dust and ashes. He can't eat that. He must starve. But Smeagol doesn't mind. Nice hobbits as Smeagol has promised. He will starve. He can't eat hobbits as food. He will starve. Poor thin Smeagol." "I'm sorry," said Frodo, "but I can't help you, I'm afraid. I think this food would do you good if you would try, but perhaps you can't even try, not yet, anyway." The hobbits munched the lembas in silence. Sam thought that it tasted far better somehow than it had for a good while. Gollum's behavior had made him attend to its flavor again, but he did not feel comfortable. Gollum watched every morsel from hand to mouth, like an expectant dog by a diner's chair. Only when they had finished and were preparing to rest was he apparently convinced that they had no hidden dainties that he would share in. Then he went and sat by himself a few paces away and whimpered a little. "Look here," Sam whispered to Frodo, not too softly. He didn't really care whether Gollum heard him or not. "We've got to get some sleep, but not both together with that hungry villain nigh. Promise or no promise, Smeagol or Gollum, he won't change his habits in a hurry, I'll warrant. You go to sleep, Mr. Frodo, and I'll call you when I can't keep my eyelids propped up. Turn and about, same as before, while he's loose." "Perhaps you're right, Sam," said Frodo, speaking openly. "There is a change in him, but just what kind of change and how deep, I'm not sure yet. Seriously, though, I don't think there is any need for fear at present. Still, watch, if you wish. Give me about 2 hours, not more, and then call me." So tired was Frodo that his head fell forward on his breast, and he slept almost as soon as he had spoken those words. Gollum seemed no longer to have any fears. He curled up and went quickly to sleep, quite unconcerned. Presently his breath was hissing softly through his clenched teeth, but he lay still as stone. After a while, fearing that he would drop off himself if he sat listening to his two companions breathing, Sam got up and gently prodded Gollum. His hands uncurled and twitched, but he made no other movement. Sam bent down and said, "Fish," close to his ear, but there was no response, not even a catch in Gollum's breathing. Sam scratched his head. "Must really be asleep," he muttered. "And if I was like Gollum, he wouldn't wake up never again." He restrained the thoughts of his sword and the rope that sprang to his mind, and went and sat down by his master. When he woke up, the sky above was dim, not lighter but darker than when they had breakfasted. Sam leapt to his feet, not least from his own feeling of vigor and hunger. He suddenly understood that he had slept the daylight away, 9 hours at least. Frodo was still fast asleep, lying now stretched on his side. Gollum was not to be seen. Various reproachful names for himself came to Sam's mind, drawn from the gaffer's large paternal word hoard. Then it also occurred to him that his master had been right. There had, for the present, been nothing to guard against. They were, at any rate, both alive and unthrottled. "Poor wretch," he said, half remorsefully. "Now I wonder where he's got to." "Not far," said a voice from above him. He looked up and saw the shape of Gollum's large head and ears against the evening sky. "Here, what are you doing?" cried Sam, his suspicions coming back as soon as he saw that shape. "Smeagol is hungry," said Gollum. "Be back soon." "Come back now," shouted Sam. "Hi, come back!" But Gollum had vanished. Frodo woke at the sound of Sam's shout and sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Hello," he said. "Anything wrong? What's the time?" "I dunno," said Sam. "After sundown, I reckon. And he's gone off. Says he's hungry." "Don't worry," said Frodo. "There's no help for it, but he'll come back, you'll see. The promise will hold yet a while, and he won't leave his precious anyway." Frodo made light of it when he learned that he had slept soundly for hours with Gollum, and a very hungry Gollum, too, loose beside him. Don't think of any of your gaffer's hard times, he said. You were worn out, and it has turned out well. We are now both rested, and we have a hard road ahead, the worst road of all. About the food, said Sam. How long's it going to take us to do this job? And when it's done, what are we going to do then? The whey bread keeps you on your legs in a wonderful way, though it doesn't satisfy the innards properly, as you might say. Not to my feeling, anyhow, meaning no disrespect to them as made it. But you have to eat some of it every day, and it doesn't grow. I reckon we've got enough to last, say, 3 weeks or so, and that with a tight belt and a light tooth, mind you. We've been a bit free with it so far. I don't know how long we shall take to finish, said Frodo. We were miserably delayed in the hills, but Samwise Gamgee, my dear hobbit, indeed. Sam, my dearest hobbit, friend of friends. I do not think we need give thought to what comes after that. To do the job, as you put it, what hope is there that we ever shall? And if we do, who knows what will come of that? If the one goes into the fire, and we are at hand, I ask you, Sam, are we ever likely to need bread again? I think not. If we can nurse our limbs to bring us to Mount Doom, that is all we can do. More than I can, I begin to feel. Sam nodded silently. He took his master's hand and bent over it. He did not kiss it, though his tears fell on it. Then he turned away, drew his sleeve over his nose, and got up and stamped about, trying to whistle and saying between the efforts, "Where's that dratted creature?" It was actually not long before Gollum returned, but he came so quickly that they did not hear him till he stood before them. His fingers and face were soiled with black mud. He was still chewing and slavering. What was he chewing, or what he was chewing, they did not ask or like to think. Worms or beetles or something slimy out of holes, thought Sam. Brrr! The nasty creature, the poor wretch! Gollum said nothing to them until he had drunk deeply and washed himself in the stream. Then he came to them, licking his lips. "Better now," he said. "Are we rested? Ready to go on? Nice hobbitses. They sleep beautifully. Trust Smeagol now. Very, very good." The next stage of their journey was much the same as the last, and they went on the gully as they went on, the gully became ever shallower, and the slope of its floor more gradual. Its bottom was less stony and more earthy, and slowly its sides dwindled to mere banks. They began to wind and wander. That night drew to its end, but clouds were now over moon and star, and they knew of the coming of day only by the slow spreading of the thin gray light. In that chill hour they came to the end of the watercourse. The banks became moss-grown mounds. Over the last shelf of rotting stone the stream gurgled and fell down into a brown bog and was lost. Dry reeds hissed and rattled through, though they could feel no wind.
Easton, stop. Easton.
On either side and in front, wide fens and mires now lay, stretching away southward and eastward into the dim half-light. Mists curled and smoked from dark and noisome pools. The reek of them hung stifling in the still air. Far away, now almost due south, the mountain walls of Mordor loomed, like a black bar of rugged clouds floating above a dangerous, fog-bound sea. I've got a picture for you that I think is appropriate right here. So I will show it. Here is the bog with the mountains in the background. Those are the mountains of Mordor. So, I think Becca was just on for a minute and then she popped off. So, sorry about that. The hobbits were now wholly in the hands of Gollum. They did not know and could not guess in that misty light that they were in fact only just within the northern borders of the marshes, the main expanse of which lay south of them. They could, if they had known the lands, with some delay have retraced their steps a little, and then turning east have come round over hard roads to the bare plain of Dagorlad. the field of the ancient battle before the gates of Mordor. Not that there was great hope in such a course, only that stony plain there was no cover. On that stony plain there was no cover, and across it ran the highways of the orcs and the soldiers of the enemy. Not even the cloaks of Lorien would have concealed them there. "How do we shape our course now, Smeagol?" asked Frodo. "Must we cross these evil-smelling fens?" No need at all," said Gollum. "Not if hobbitses want to reach the Dark Mountains and go to see him very quick. Back a little and round a little." His skinny arm waved north and east, "and you can come on hard, cold roads in the very gates of his country. Lots of his people will be there looking out for guests, very pleased to take them straight to him. Oh, yes, his eye watches that way all the time. It caught Smeagol there long ago." Gollum shuddered. "But Smeagol has used his eyes since then." Yes, I've used eyes and feet and nose since then. I know other ways, more difficult, not so quick, but better if we don't want him to see. Follow Smeagol. He can take you through the marshes, through the mists, nice thick mists. Follow Smeagol very carefully, and you may go a long way, quite a long way, before he catches you. Yes, perhaps. It was already day, a windless and sullen morning, and the marsh reeks lay in heavy banks. No sun pierced the low-clouded sky, and Gollum seemed anxious to continue the journey at once. So, after a brief rest, they set out again, and were soon lost in the shadowy, silent world, cut off from all view of the lands about, either the hills that they had left, or the mountains that they sought. They went slowly in single file, Gollum, Sam, Frodo. Frodo seemed the most weary of the three, and slow though they went, he often lagged. The hobbits soon found that what had looked like one vast fen was really an endless network of pools, and soft mires, and winding half-strangled watercourses. Among these, a cunning eye and foot could thread a wandering path. Gollum certainly had that cunning, and needed all of it. His head on its long neck was ever turning this way and that, while he sniffed and muttered all the time to himself. Sometimes he would hold up his hand and halt them, while he went forward a little, crouching, testing the ground with fingers or toes, or merely listening with one ear pressed to the earth. It was dreary and wearisome. Cold, clammy winter still held sway in this forsaken country. The only green was the scum of livid weed on the dark, greasy surfaces of the sullen waters. Dead grasses and rotting reeds loomed up in the mists like ragged shadows of long-forgotten summers. As the day wore on, the light increased a little, and the mists lifted, growing thinner and more transparent. Far above the rot and vapors of the world, the sun was riding high and golden now in a serene country with floors of dazzling foam, but only a passing ghost of her could they see below, bleared, pale, giving no color and no warmth. But even at this faint reminder of her presence, Gollum scowled and flinched. He halted their journey, and they rested, squatting like little hunted animals in the borders of a great brown reed thicket. There was a deep silence, only scraped on its surface by the faint quiver of empty seed plumes and broken grass blades trembling in small air movements that they could not feel. "Not a bird," said Sam mournfully. No birds," said Gollum. "Nice birds." He licked his teeth. "No birds here. There are snakeses, wormses, things in the pools. Lots of things, lots of nasty things. No birds," he said. He ended sadly. Sam looked at him with distaste. So passed the third day of their journey with Gollum. Before the shadows of evening were long in happier lands, they went on again, always on and on, with only brief halts. These they made not so much for the rest as to help Gollum, for now even he had to go forward with great care, and he was sometimes at a loss for a while. They had come to the very midst of the dead marshes, and it was dark. They walked slowly, stooping, keeping close in line, following attentively every move that Gollum made. The fens grew more wet, opening into wide, stagnant mares, among which it grew more and more difficult to find the firmer places where feet could tread without sinking into gurgling mud. The travelers were light, or maybe none of them would have ever found a way through. Presently it grew altogether dark. The air itself seemed black and heavy to breathe. When light appeared, Sam rubbed his eyes. Dimly shining smoke, some like misty flames flickering slowly above clean candles. Here and there they twisted like ghostly sheets unfurled by hidden hands, but neither of his companions spoke a word. At last Sam could bear it no longer. "What's all this, Gollum?" he said in a whisper. "These lights. They're all round us now. Are we trapped? Who are they?" Gollum looked up. A dark water was before him, and he was crawling on the ground, this way and that, doubtful of the way. "Yes, they are all round us," he whispered. "The tricksy lights, candles of corpses. Yes, yes. Don't you heed them. Don't look. Don't follow them. Where's the master?" Sam looked back and found that Frodo had lagged again. He could not see him. He went some paces back into the darkness, not daring to move far, or to call in more than a hoarse whisper. Suddenly he stumbled against Frodo, who was standing lost in thought, looking at the pale lights. His hand hung stiff in his sides. Water and slime were dripping from them. "Come, Mr. Frodo," said Sam. "Don't look at them. Gollum says we mustn't. Let's keep up with him and get out of this cursed place as quick as we can. If we can." "All right," said Frodo, as if returning out of a dream. "I'm coming. Go on." Hurrying forward again, Sam tripped, catching his foot in some old root or tussock. He fell and came heavily on his hands, which sank deep into sticky ooze, so that his face was brought close to the surface of the dark mirror. There was a faint hiss. A noisome smell went up. The lights flickered and danced and swirled. For a moment the water below him looked like some window glazed with grimy glass, through which he was peering. Wrenching his hands out of the bog, he sprang back with a cry. "There are dead things, dead faces in the water," he said with horror. "Dead faces." Gollum laughed. "The dead marshes, yes, yes, that is their name," he cackled. "You should not look in when the candles are lit." "Who are they? What are they?" asked Sam, shuddering, turning to Frodo, who was now behind him. "I don't know," said Frodo in a dreamlike voice, "but I have seen them too, in the pools when the candles were lit. They lie in all the pools, pale faces, deep, deep under the dark water. I saw them, grim faces and evil and noble faces and sad, many faces proud and fair and weeds in the silver hair, but all foul, all rotting, all dead. A fell light is in them." Frodo hid his eyes in his hands. "I know not who they are, but I thought I saw there men and elves and orcs beside them." "Yes, yes," said Gollum, "all dead, all rotten, elves and men and orcses. The dead marshes. There was a great battle long ago. Yes, so they told him when Smeagol was young, when I was young before the Precious came. It was a great battle. Tall men with long swords, and terrible elves and orcses shrieking. They fought on the plain for days and months at the Black Gateses, but the marshes have grown since then, swallowed up the graves, always creeping, creeping." "But that is an age and more ago," said Sam. "The dead can't really be there. Is it some devilry hatched in the dark land?" "Who knows? Smeagol doesn't know," answered Gollum. "You cannot reach them. You cannot touch them. We tried once, yes, precious. I tried once, but you cannot reach them. Only shapes to see, perhaps not to touch. No, precious, all dead." Sam looked darkly at him and shuddered again, thinking that he guessed why Smeagol had tried to touch them. "Well, I don't want to see them," he said. "Never again. Can't we get on and get away?" "Yes, yes," said Gollum, "but slowly, slowly, very carefully, or hobbits go down to join the dead ones and light little candles. Follow Smeagol. Don't look at lightses." He crawled away to the right, seeking for a path round the mere. They came close behind, stooping, often using their hands even as he did. "These precious little golems, or 3 precious little golems in a row we shall be, if this goes on much longer," thought Sam. At last they came to the end of the Black Mere, and they crossed it perilously, crawling or hopping from one treacherous island tussock to another. Often they floundered, stepping or falling hands first into waters as noisome as a cesspool, till they were slimed and fouled about almost up to their necks, and stank in one another's nostrils. It was late in the night when at length they reached firmer ground again. Gollum hissed and whispered to himself, but it appeared that he was pleased, in some mysterious way, by some blended sense of feel and smell, and uncanny memories for shapes in the dark. He seemed to know just where he was again, and to be sure of his road ahead. "Now, on we go," he said. "Nice hobbitses. Brave hobbitses. Very, very weary, of course. So we are, my precious, all of us. But we would take master away from the wicked lights. Yes, yes, we must." With these words he started off again, almost at a trot, down what appeared to be a long lane between high reeds, and they stumbled after him as quickly as they could. But in a little while he stooped suddenly and sniffed the air doubtfully, hissing as if he was troubled or displeased again. "What is it?" growled Sam, misinterpreting the signs. What's the need to sniff? The stink nearly knocks me down with my nose held. You stink and master stinks. The whole place stinks." "Yes, yes, and Sam stinks," answered Gollum. "Poor Smeagol smells it, but good Smeagol bears it. Helps nice master, but that's no matter. The air's moving. Change is coming. Smeagol wonders. He's not happy." He went on again, but his uneasiness grew, and every now and again he stood up to his full height, craning his neck eastward and southward. For some time the hobbits could not hear or feel what was troubling him. Then suddenly all 3 halted, stiffening and listening. To Frodo and Sam it seemed that they had heard, far away, a long wailing cry, high and thin and cruel. They shivered. At the same moment, and the stirring of the air became perceptible to them, and it grew very cold. As they stood, straining their ears, they heard a noise like a wind coming in the distance. The misty lights wavered, dimmed, and went out. Gollum could not move. He stood shaking and gibbering to himself, until with a rush the wind came upon them, hissing and snarling over the marshes. The night became less dark, light enough for them to see, or half-see, shapeless drifts of fog curling and twisting as it rolled over them and past them. Looking up, they saw the clouds breaking and shredding, and then, high in the south, the moon glimmered out, riding in the flying wrack. For a moment, the sight of it gladdened the hearts of the hobbits, but Gollum cowered down, muttering curses on the white face. Then Frodo and Sam, staring at the sky, breathing deeply of the fresher air, saw it come, a small cloud flying from the accursed hills, a black shadow loosed from Mordor, a vast shape, winged and ominous. It scudded across the moon, and with a deadly cry went away westward, outrunning the wind in its fell speed. They fell forward, groveling heedlessly on the cold earth, but the shadow of horror wheeled and returned, passing lower now, right above them, sweeping the fen wreck with its ghastly wings, and when it was gone, flying back to Mordor with the speed of the wrath of Sauron. And behind it the wind roared away, leaving the dead marshes bare and bleak. The naked waste, as far as the eye could pierce, even to the distant menace of the mountains, was dappled with the fitful moonlight. Frodo and Sam got up, rubbing their eyes. Little children wakened from an evil dream to find the familiar night still over the world. But Gollum lay on the ground as if he had been stunned. They roused him with difficulty, and for some time he would not lift his face, but knelt forward on his elbows, covering the back of his head with his large, flat hands. "Wraiths!" he called. "Wraiths on wings! The precious is their master! They see everything, everything! Nothing can hide from them! Curse the white face, and they tell him everything! He sees, he knows! Ach! Gollum! Gollum! Gollum!" It was not until the moon had sunk, westering far away beyond Tol Brandir, that he would get up or make a move. From that time on, Sam thought that he sensed a change in Gollum again. He was more fawning and would be friendly, but Sam surprised some strange looks in his eyes at times, especially toward Frodo, and he went back more and more into his old manner of speaking, and Sam had another growing anxiety. Frodo seemed to be weary to the point of exhaustion. He said nothing, indeed, he hardly spoke at all, and he did not complain, but he walked like one who carries a load, the weight of which is ever increasing, and he dragged along slower and slower, so that Sam had often to beg Gollum to wait and not to leave their master behind. In fact, with every step toward the gate of Mordor, Frodo felt the ring on its chain about his neck grow more burdensome. He was now beginning to feel it as an actual weight dragging him earthwards. But far more he was troubled by the eye, so he called it to himself. It was that more than the drag of the ring that made him cower and stoop as he walked. The eye, that horrible growing sense of a hostile will that strove with great power to pierce all shadows of cloud and earth and flesh, and to see you, to pin you under its deadly gaze, naked, immovable, so thin, so frail and thin, the veils were become that still warded it off. Frodo knew just where the present habitation and heart of that will now was, as certainly as a man can tell the direction of the sun with his eyes shut. He was facing it, and its potency beat upon his brow. Gollum probably felt something of the same sort, but what went on in his wretched heart between the pressure of the eye and the lust of the ring that was so near, and his groveling promise made half in the fear of cold iron, the hobbits did not guess. Frodo gave no thought to it. Sam's mind was occupied mostly with his master, hardly noticing the dark cloud that had fallen on his own heart. He put Frodo in front of him now, and kept a watchful eye on every movement of his, supporting him if he stumbled, and trying to encourage him with clumsy words. When day came at last, the hobbits were surprised to see how much closer the ominous mountains had already drawn. The air was now clearer and colder, and though still far off, the walls of Mordor were no longer a cloudy menace on the edge of sight, but as grim black towers they frowned against a dismal waste. The marshes were at an end, dying away into dead peats and wide flats of dry, cracked mud. The land ahead rose in long, shallow slopes, barren and pitiless, toward the desert that lay at Sauron's gate. While the gray light lasted, they cowered under a black stone like worms, shrinking lest the winged terror should pass and spy them with its cruel eyes. The remainder of that journey was a shadow of growing fear in which memory could find nothing to rest upon. For 2 more nights they struggled on through the weary, pathless land. The air, as it seemed to them, grew harsh and filled with a bitter reek that caught their breath and parched their mouths. At last, on the 5th morning since they took the road with Gollum, they halted once more. Before them, dark in the dawn, the great mountains reached up to roofs of smoke and cloud. Out from their feet were flung huge buttresses and broken hills, and were now at the nearest scarce a dozen miles away. Frodo looked round in horror. Dreadful as the dead marshes had been, and the arid moors of the Noman lands were more loathsome far was the country that the crawling day now slowly unveiled to his shrinking eyes. Even to the mirror of dead faces, some haggard phantom of green spring would come. But here neither spring nor summer would ever come again. Here nothing lived, not even the leprous growths that feed on rottenness. The gasping pools were choked with ash and crawling muds, sickly white and gray, as if the mountains had vomited the filth of their entrails upon the lands about. High mounds of crushed and powdered rock, great cones of earth, fire-blasted and poison-stained, stood like an obscene graveyard in endless rows, slowly revealed in the reluctant light. They had come to the desolation that lay before Mordor, the lasting monument to the dark labor of its slaves that should endure with all their purposes were made void. A land defiled, diseased beyond all healing, unless the great sea should enter in and wash it with oblivion. "I feel sick," said Sam. Frodo did not speak. For a while they stood there like men on the edge of a sleep where nightmare lurks, holding it off, though they know that they can only come to morning through the shadows. The light broadened and hardened. The gasping pits and poisonous mounds grew hideously clear. The sun was up, walking among clouds and long flags of smoke. But even the sunlight was defiled. The hobbits had no welcome for that light. Unfriendly, it seemed, revealing them in their helplessness, little squeaking ghosts that wandered among the ash heaps of the Dark Lord. Too weary to go further, they sought for some place where they could rest. For a while they sat without speaking under the shadow of a mound of slag, but foul fumes leaked out of it, catching their throats and choking them. Gollum was the first to get up. Spluttering and cursing he rose, and without a word or a glance at the hobbits, he crawled away on all fours. Frodo and Sam crawled after him until they came to a wide, almost circular pit, high banked upon the west. It was cold and dead, and a foul stump of oily, many-colored ooze lay at its bottom. In this evil hole they cowered, hoping in its shadow to escape the attention of the eye. The day passed slowly. A great thirst troubled them, but they drank only a few drops from their bottles, last filled in the gully, which now, as they looked back in thought, seemed to them a place of peace and beauty. The hobbits took it in turn to watch. At first, tired as they were, neither of them could sleep at all. But as the sun far away was climbing down into slow-moving cloud, Sam dozed. It was Frodo's turn to be on guard. He lay back on the slope of the pit, but that did not ease the sense of burden that was on him. He looked up at the smoke-streaked sky and saw strange phantoms, dark riding shapes and faces out of the past. He lost count of time, hovering between sleep and waking until forgetfulness came over him. Suddenly Sam woke up, thinking that he heard his master calling. It was evening. Frodo could not have called, for he had fallen asleep and had slid down nearly to the bottom of the pit. Gollum was by him. For a moment Sam thought that he was trying to rouse Frodo. Then he saw that it was not so. Gollum was talking to himself. Smeagol was holding a debate with some other thought that used the same voice but made it squeak and hiss. A pale light and a green light alternated in his eyes as he spoke. "Smeagol promised," said the first thought. "Yes, yes, my precious," came the answer. "We promised to save our precious, not to let him have it, never. But it's going to him, yes, nearer, every step. What's the hobbit going to do with it, we wonders? Yes, we wonders." "I don't know. I can't help it. Master's got it. Smeagol promised to help the master." "Yes, yes, to help the master of the precious. But if we was master, then we could help ourselves. Yes, we still keeps our promises." "But Smeagol said he would be very good. Nice hobbit. He took cruel rope off Smeagol's leg. He speaks nicely to me." "Very, very good, eh, my precious? Let's be good, good as fish, sweet one, but to ourselves, not to hurt the nice hobbits, of course, no, no." "But the precious holds the promise," the voice of Smeagol objected. "Then takes it," said the other, "and let's hold it ourselves. Then we shall be Master Gollum. Make the other hobbit, the nasty, suspicious hobbit, make him crawl, yes, Gollum." "But not the nice hobbit. Oh, no, not if it doesn't please us. Still, he's a Baggins, my precious. Yes, a Baggins. A Baggins stole it. He found it, and he said nothing. We hates the Bagginses." "No, not this Baggins. Yes, every Baggins. All peoples that keep the precious. We must have it." "But he'll see. He'll know. He'll takes it from us. He sees. He knows. He heard us make silly promises against his orders. Yes, must take it. The wraiths are searching, must take it. Not for him. No, sweet one. See, my precious, if we has it, then we can escape even from him, eh? Perhaps we grows very strong, stronger than wraiths, Lord Smeagol. Gollum the Great, the Gollum, eat fish every day, 3 times a day, fresh from the sea. Most precious Gollum, must have it. We wants it. But there's 2 of them. They'll wake too quick and kills us, whined Smeagol in a last effort. Not now, not yet. We wants it, but... And here there was a long pause, as if a new thought had wakened. Not yet, eh? Perhaps not. She might help. She might. Yes. No, not that way, wailed Smeagol. Yes, we wants it. Each time that the second thought spoke, Gollum's long hand crept out slowly, pawing towards Frodo, and then was drawn back with a jerk as Smeagol spoke again. Finally, both arms, with long fingers flexed and twitching, clawed toward his neck. Sam had lain still, fascinated by this debate, but watching every move that Gollum made from under his half-closed eyelids. To his simple mind, ordinary hunger, the desire to eat hobbits had seemed the chief danger in Gollum. He realized now that it was not so. Gollum was feeling the terrible call of the ring. The Dark Lord was he, of course, but Sam wondered who she was. One of the nasty friends of the little wretch had made in his wanderings, he supposed. Then he forgot the point, for things had plainly gone far enough, and were getting dangerous. A great heaviness was in all his limbs, but he roused himself with an effort and sat up. Something warned him to be careful and not to reveal that he had overheard the debate. He let out a loud sigh and gave a huge yawn. "What's the time?" he said sleepily. Gollum sent out a long hiss through his teeth. He stood up for a moment, tense and menacing, and then he collapsed, falling forward onto all fours and crawling up the bank of the pit. "Nice hobbitses, nice Samwise," he said. "Sleepy heads, yes, sleepy heads. Leave good Smeagol to watch, but it's evening, dusk is creeping, time to go. High time, thought Sam, and time we parted too. Yet it crossed his mind to wonder if indeed Gollum was not now as dangerous, turned loose as kept with them. Curse him! I wish he was choked, he muttered. He stumbled down the bank and roused his master. Strangely enough, Frodo felt refreshed. He had been dreaming. The dark shadow had passed, and a fair vision had visited him in the land of disease. In this land of disease, nothing remained of it in his memory, yet because of it, he felt glad and lighter of heart. His burden was less heavy on him. Gollum welcomed him with dog-like delight. He chuckled and clattered, cracking his long fingers and pawing at Frodo's knees. Frodo smiled at him. Come, he said, you have guided us well and faithfully. This is the last stage. Bring us to the gate, and then I will not ask you to go further. Bring us to the gate, and you may go where you wish, only not to our enemies. To the gate, say? Gollum squeaked, seeming surprised and frightened. To the gate, master says. Yes, he says so, and good Smeagol does what he asks, oh yes. But when we gets closer, we'll see, perhaps. We'll see then. It won't look nice at all. Oh, no. Oh, no. Go on with you, said Sam. Let's get it over. In the falling dusk, they scrambled out of the pit and slowly threaded their way through the dead land. They had not gone far before they felt once more the fear that had fallen on them when the winged shape swept over the marshes. They halted, cowering on the evil-smelling ground, but they saw nothing in the gloomy evening sky above, and soon the menace passed, high overhead, going maybe on some swift errand from the Barad-dûr. After a while, Gollum got up and crept forward again, muttering and shaking. About an hour after midnight, the fear fell on them a third time, but it now seemed more remote, as if it were passing far above the clouds, rushing with terrible speed into the west. Gollum, however, was helpless with terror, and was convinced that they were being hunted, that their approach was known. 3 times, he whimpered. 3 times is a threat. They feels us here. They feel the Precious. The Precious is their master. We cannot go any further this way. It's no use. No use. Pleading and kind words were no longer of any avail. It was not until Frodo commanded him angrily and laid a hand on his sword hilt that Gollum would get up again, and at last he rose with a snarl and went before them like a beaten dog. So they stumbled on through the weary end of the night, and until the coming of another day of fear, they walked in silence with bowed heads, seeing nothing and hearing nothing but the wind hissing in their ears. And that is the end of chapter 2. Chapter 3 is called The Black Gate is Closed, and the first word is before. And I hope you're enjoying the reading of the story Lord of the Rings. God bless you, and have a great night.